Hello. Welcome to this panel discussion during the Asian Board Games Festival Philippines 2026. This is the Zenobia Award panel, and we are joined by Sherria Ayuandini. Am I saying that?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Nico. Perfect. Yes.
Sherria Ayuandini. And this is a panel about our experience during the Zenobia Award. I'm just going to introduce our guest. Sherria Ayuandini holds a dual PhD in medical anthropology and political sociology from Washington University in St. Louis, USA, and the University of Amsterdam, Netherlands. Over the past 2 decades, her work has informed policymaking and strategic directions of national governments, international bodies, philanthropic foundations, and grassroots organizations in more than 20 countries across Europe, the United States, the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. She is currently the Chief Regional Officer at Research for Impact, spearheading the strengthening of research and impact support through making behavioral and social science transformative in Southeast Asia and Greater Asia. Dr. Ayuandini is an avid gamer from a very young age with a growing collection of more than 450 tabletop games. Her debut as a board game designer. Sorry, I wonder why it's there. I'm just gonna like this. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
No, it was working with no problems a while ago. And we're going to talk about the Zenobia Award. The Zenobia Award this is from the website. The Zenobia Award is both a competition and a mentoring program in which game designers from underrepresented groups develop and submit historical tabletop game prototypes. Throughout the design process, competitors will receive mentoring and feedback from industry leaders to help them move towards successful game publication. So Sherria is a finalist in the inaugural Zenobia Award held in 2021 with her game Kartini From Darkness to Light, while me, Nico, I'm a finalist in the second Zenobia Award held in 2023 with my game Pursuit of Aguinaldo. Okay, yeah, so I will move the mic. I'm just surprised that you have time to actually play games with all the things you've been doing.
I'm surprised as well.
This is a panel, but I'm also technically moderating. So I'm going to just ask Sherria some questions about her experience about the Zenobia Award. And the goal is also to invite people to join Zenobia for the third time, which is we're going to say when it's happening. So before anything else, what is Kartini From Darkness to Light about? And can you briefly describe the gameplay for the game? And you can show it also.
It's here. It's accidentally here. No, I actually put it there so people can actually see. First of all, Nico, thank you for actually inviting me to this. This is really great. I wanted to be there in person, but unfortunately the timing was not our friend at the moment. I had something in Singapore at the same time, so I wasn't able to fly into Manila. If not, I would have absolutely loved to. I was actually in Manila in February, so it just happens to be not the right time. Yes, so I entered Zenobia Awards with my board game Kartini. So as you can see, that's Kartini now. So the board game is a strategic board game. I think some people would call it a Euro game, basically. So it's a strategic board game. There's an element of engine building, there's an element of worker placement and resource management. And the setup is late 1800, early 1900 in Indonesia. And what you do is you manage a school. So you invite girls from different islands in Indonesia. They come to your school, they study, right? So you need to make sure that you give them the right teacher, you provide them with the right books, and then after they study, they graduate, they take on different professions. And depending on their professions, then they can do many other different things, and that would help your games to even open up. So what I want to do with this game is to simulate the idea that if you educate women, then you open up society and there are more things that you can do because we all take part in the society to make it better. So yeah, so that's what Kartini is about. And it is based on a real person. So Kartini is Indonesia's mother of education. She's the first feminist in Indonesia. And she's still celebrated until today, every 21st of April. So we just celebrated her day, Kartini Day. Every 21st of April, we remember her as the first woman who established and to really promote education for young women in Indonesia.
Wow, wow. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like something I'd really want to try. And so I can imagine like the engine building is like you're educating the women and then the
Yes, very much.
together because society is progressing, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I just want to know a little bit about you. So how did you get into the tabletop board game hobby? And what are your favorite games and like game genres?
I've always, I think in my bio, you also read, like I've always been a lifelong gamer. So I've been a gamer since I was very, very, very young. And both my mom and dad introduced me to tabletop gaming. So I am Dutch Indonesian. I'm naturalized Dutch citizens, but I grew up in Indonesia and I moved to the Netherlands and then I became a Dutch citizen there. So when I grew up in Indonesia, my mom and dad introduced me to board games, but it's more kind of like more mass market board games that I happened to come across at that time. Because when I was growing up in Indonesia, I grew up in a small town, a very small town in Indonesia. So I actually didn't have that much access to board games. So any board games that came across me, I always play. So from the obvious one like Monopoly, for example, to like Game of Life and everything like that, right? Like anything that I can get my hands on, I would play. And whenever I had a chance to go to a bigger city like in Jakarta, for example, if I traveled abroad, the first thing that I would prioritize is to find a board game, whatever board game. It's just as long as I don't know that board game and I can get my hands on it, I would like save my money in order to buy the board games. So that's how I grew up my board game collection when I was very young. So yeah, so I've always loved board games, always played board games as much as I can, even though I didn't actually have access to board games at that time. And then I studied in the US, as you mentioned in my bio as well. When I studied in the US, that's when I was first introduced to modern board gaming. And I think I remember the very, very first game that I played that is considered modern board game genre was Forbidden Island. That was the first one. After Forbidden Island, I even remember Forbidden Island. After Forbidden Island, I played Betrayal of House on the Hill. And then it's just kind of like opened the floodgate, basically. And then I started, so that was 2014, 15, something like that. And then I started really gaming. So that's how I started gaming. And I found out that I love Euro games because we don't really depend on luck, right? Like, so there's a lot of kind of like you strategize in order to be able to win. And I find that to be very, very appealing. I gravitate towards really heavy Euro games, even though I don't play them a lot. But I just love really understanding the mechanism behind them and so on. So that's how I ended up with board gaming.
Yeah, but it sounds like you actually started on like the American side of board gaming. So how did you transition to what was your like first Euro game and like how did you transition to the European style?
I think the first one was probably Five Tribes. Still one of my favorite games of all time. Yeah. I also need to mention, not because Emerson is in the room, but Century is great. I actually do love Century. Yes, we played it a lot. And I actually have Reef just here. Emerson, you can't see it, but it's on the other, just literally on the other cubicle. I have Reef. Reef also one of our favorites. Yeah, so I think it was Five Tribes was the first one. From then on, started playing something a little bit more like that. I always really like the idea of how different mechanisms can hang together. And apparently the way my brain works, it's easier for me to design that kind of game rather than designing something that is more streamlined and focusing on like one really strong mechanics, right? Like not belabor the point, and not just because Emerson is in the room, but Century is fantastic for it because it's like one mechanism that you really focus and to support that mechanism, right? And I think it's actually harder to design that kind of game that really stand alone on that very strong mechanics. Then when you have several mechanics that you're like, in this way, this is how it works when you go this way. And this is how it works when you go that way. So for me, I'm more able to design that kind of game. No, just to say that a little bit of a glimpse that I feel like different designers have different style and different designers have different strength. And it's usually you lean on your strength when you design a board game.
So your type is the more like point salady type where you can do a lot of different things and you're trying to balance
yeah
like I see. Like that kind of
Exactly.
Euro game. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
see.
it is like I like the idea of you have many different pathways of to winning, right? It's not just one way of
Yes.
winning. But you're like, oh,
Mhm.
maybe I'll try this way, or I'll try this way, I'll try that way, like so. I like that. I also like games that tell stories, and that's what I
Yeah.
try to do in my game basically. So when you play the game, there's a story behind it, and because you play the game, then you're like, oh, this is what the game is about. So yeah, so that's the kind of game that I like to design.
Mhm. Also, since we're talking about design now, so how and why did you join the Zenobia Game Design Competition? And for those who don't know, the Zenobia Game Design Competition is actually Sharia's first foray into game design.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, very much. I have one main reason. So when I start playing board games, I also start getting very acquainted to the entire world of board gaming, right? Even though board gaming is great overall, there's always this one challenge that it keeps coming back, which is board gaming tends to replicate a lot of mechanism of colonialism, right?
Yes.
So this
Yes.
entire idea, like I mean, some of the games I think a lot of people are very aware, like Catan, for example, like used to be
Yeah.
called Settlers of Catan, now it's called just
Yeah.
Catan, or things like Mombasa, for example, right? Like there are some of these games that might have also received criticisms and have to
Mhm.
adjust themselves to accommodate, right? Like even Five Tribes, one of my favorite games of all time, has
Yeah.
received some kind of this criticism. So,
Yeah.
so I know there's this little bit of love affairs between board gaming and colonialism. So it's always been like a sticking point to me when it comes to board game hobby as a hobby. So when Zenobia came and it says, how can we complement all of these games that are already there in the market with alternative voices, basically. So I felt like I had to do something because I don't want to just, complain and be sad about the situation, but not actually put effort into at least be part of some sort of solution to it, right? So that's why
Yes.
I pushed myself to actually submit a game design for Zenobia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually just the other night I was on my way home. I think I was listening to Ludology, and there was an episode. I think Settlers of Catan in French literally
Uh-huh.
translates to the colonizers of Catan, something like that. So
Yes.
it's much more obvious. And yeah,
Yeah.
and but yeah, you have games like Puerto Rico and
Yeah, exactly. Puerto Rico, the other one. Yeah.
there's some
Exactly.
games that are a little controversial when it comes to because of the underlying themes of colonialism. So that being said, you already kind of started on it. So why is Kartini the game you chose to design for Zenobia, and why
Yes.
do you think
Yeah.
this topic is important?
Yeah, so Zenobia's when if anyone's interested in joining Zenobia, Zenobia is very important to highlight either the topic themselves or the person who designed the game is come from kind of like minority background, so to say, right? So it's because the idea is to enrich the voices in board gaming. So then because of that, obviously I wanted to bring some stories and some topics from Indonesia. And at that time, the game almost create itself because Kartini, it's about educating women, and for some reason we don't have that many games about schools, and I don't know why. And I thought, okay, school mechanism pretty much kind of lend itself to a game, and the other reason is because I wanted to have a game where the entire characters are all women.
Mhm.
So when you have Kartini and you see every single characters in this game, they're all women, and that was by design. And when Ion Game Design said that they want to publish my game, we have a discussion of what are some of the non-negotiables, right? And that's one of my non-negotiables, basically. Not because I'm saying that, oh, look how great it is if it is all women. Not about that. It's because, and I remember this very often, right? Like the great Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the one Supreme Justice in US, she was once asked, they said, Madam Justice, how many women should sit in the Supreme Justice of the US for you to then feels like there's already an equality between men and women? And she said, when it's all nine, she said. Because she said, if all nine of the chairs are set and filled in by women and nobody blink an eye, nobody bat an eyelash, that's when equality has already achieved. Because nobody would bat an eyelash if I have a game, they're all just men characters in it,
Yes.
right? Everyone was like, well, I guess that makes sense. You're so used to it. But when everyone is women, then suddenly you feel like there's something wrong. It's uncomfortable, right? So that's why I wanted to do that. It's not to. I always said this. It's not to supplant. It's not to say that this is the better way to do it. It's not the best way to do it. But it's an alternative. If we have one version of history, one version of the world out there, let's have another version of it. Let's have both versions at the same time. So people are experiencing and exposed to both, right? So we don't feel one is giving us discomfort compared to the other. So that's why Kartini, basically.
Yeah, it's not necessarily to say there shouldn't be men, but more of why can't all women be normal? Yeah,
Exactly. Yes,
right.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
Putting it well, Nico. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, I want to clarify something. Is that Zenobia is not because when we say game design for minorities, you might think races like the Asians, Southeast Asians, but Zenobia is also about any kind of minority. So including persons with disabilities, LGBTQ, and sadly, in board games, women is a minority. In board games, women designers and women representation is still somewhat a minority. So you hear about Zenobia, you join now Zenobia, and so how did Zenobia Award help you as a first-time game designer?
So my experience with Zenobia, and I think Nico afterwards might be good to hear your experience because I think it's slightly different, my Zenobia and your Zenobia, right? And then the third Zenobia might also have a little bit of a tweak.
Yeah.
So in my Zenobia, I think the similarities between my Zenobia experience and Nico's is that we are assigned a mentor. I think that's one of the strengths of Zenobia Award, that you go through the entire process of board game design with someone who's already went through the process. So they can show you the rope.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah, sure.
Were you assigned only one mentor?
Yes, that's the difference. I had one mentor, and I know you have. Yeah.
Yeah, because we were assigned a cohort, and the cohort had multiple mentors. Okay, so that's a big difference.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it's different. So in my case, each of us has one mentor, but the mentor has several different mentees. So they don't only have one. But I have one mentor that I can talk to, even though I can also reach out to the other people in Zenobia because I know who they are, right? And they're very open as well. And I did that. Like I also got input from other people as well, not just my mentor directly. But I was assigned a mentor, and then we have steps in terms of developing the game. So we start with just submitting just like a blurb about what your idea was, and then if you're selected to the next round. So it's basically always like one stage, next stage, and every time the pool gets smaller, right? So the first one is what's the idea, and then the second one was elaboration of the idea. So what is the theme? Why do you think it's important? What do you think the mechanism is going to be, and so on and so forth. And then after you pass that stage, and it asks, okay, can you create? What's the rules? Like what is the gameplay, right? So then you create that, and then you go into the prototyping, and then you go into the final round, where you need to kind of create everything, including a tabletop simulator. So you actually have an online version of the game so that the judges can play your games and can test it out. So it's every step of the way. And that's the great thing about my experience, that it is split into those different steps, that every step of the way that your mentor is able to give you quite a lot of inputs, quite a lot of insights on how to go about, how about rules, about prototyping, what are some of the things that are important to consider, for example. So to me, it was really great because before that, I am completely unaware of what is the process of making a board games look like, board game design, and we can talk about board game development later because it's two different things. Yeah, so it was very, very, very helpful because there's a lot of knowledge that I feel that is behind the curtain, so to say, maybe not closed doors, but behind the curtain that you would not know until you actually do it and be part of the industry. Yeah, but it's probably a bit different with you, right, Nico?
Yeah. Wait, let me just put some context also into Zenobia. Because Zenobia is backed by industry. Like, let me just go through some of the sponsors and people who are behind Zenobia, just to give an idea. So Zenobia, the process, if you're curious, it's a year. Was it a year long for you? Yes.
Yeah, it was. Well, it's a 7 months, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, for us, it was, I think, a year long. Our schedules, the contest application started on October in 2023. And then the grand prize winner was announced in November in 2024. So it was almost like 11 months. So let just some idea. The sponsors of Zenobia. So we have Fourth Circle Games, GMT
Yeah.
Games, Leader Games is a sponsor. Let's see, is San Diego History Convention, Tabletopia. Well, this was for the one I joined at least. And
Yeah.
and Jeffrey Engelstein was also a silver sponsor. But these are just sponsors because the actual mentors are also different people from the industry. So my experience, so I had already been designing games for quite a while before when I joined. And to be honest, when I first joined and I heard that a lot of people joined and they were first time designers, I was a little shocked. It was like surprised, like, wow, you guys are so brave to join a contest and you guys have never designed a game before, because I already had an idea of how hard designing games was. But as I went through the process and as the mentors were there and the cohorts were there and the workshops were there, it was actually a very good, well, for those who have experience, it was a very good refresher. And personally for me, because I'm self-taught because we're here in the Philippines, so it was a good validation of the knowledge and experiences that I had had previously. But I could also see that for first-time designers, it's not only a good introduction, but it would actually help you make a pretty good game by the end of it.
Yeah.
As long as you really put in the work, and maybe you have to have a lot of board game experience beforehand. Like you can't just have been playing Monopoly and then join, right? Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Agreed.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. You kind of have to speak the language of the mentors at the very least, right? The mentors are gonna help you, but if you never heard what worker placement or a Euro game is, then how can the mentors keep you up to speed, right? Do you know how many joined Zenobia One?
Oh, in the hundreds. I forget, like 200, something like that. The first one.
Okay,
Yeah.
those four. I think in ours there was like 100 plus, but like
Yeah.
every stage you would get more than half would disappear every stage.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
people just no judgment. I mean, everyone has their lives, but I guess they couldn't keep up with the contest. So yeah, it was pretty rigorous, but it was a lot of fun. Also, so like, I don't know. If I didn't have game design experience beforehand, I don't know if I would have made it. So I don't know how you were able to do it, because like me, I wouldn't have been that confident. But I'm not to dissuade anyone. No, sorry, this is supposed to be to encourage you to guys to join. No, but no, it's great. You just have to expect it to be rigorous but fun and put in the work. Okay, so the Zenobia Award has different stages. So Sherry and I were talking before this, and she actually had more stages than ours. So you have an idea of how the contest goes. Is you have a concept proposal. This is just like broad strokes. What is your idea? An initial design, and then a playable design, and then the final submission. But of course, in between these stages, some don't pass and they don't get to the next stage. So how did your design change between each stage?
I forgot specifically how, but definitely change, because every stage then you would have inputs from your mentor, but then you also do play testing. And then you
Yeah.
then find out, oh, the balance might not make sense if it's this way, and then you tweak the mechanism. So
Mhm.
I still have those kind of like drafts and sketches from the very beginning until it's now what it is, and it's quite different. I mean, the skeleton is there, the skeleton is the same, but the specific mechanism and definitely the balance is absolutely different. And then to the actual game that is published, it's also, there are quite several elements that was introduced during the development. So a board game it takes a while. It takes a while for it to actually be produced. And I think a lot of people might not realize that. Like, I think people think that when you have an idea in mind, you have a design in mind, it's done. It needs to be produced, but it is not. It needs to kind of like really go through this process of reiterating and then refinement, and to actually really have the right balance at the end. It's very crucial. So that development part, it's really also very, very, very important part of a board game design, board game producing.
Yeah. Mine changed so much. Like the first draft is completely different, I think. But I remember now that the reason why they wanted a concept proposal was actually to test your knowledge of the history. Uh,
Yes.
yes, also that like you have to. I bought books on my topic and I read through it.
Yeah.
And the final game was very different, but yeah, as you were saying, like conceptually, at least thematically and historically, it's still kind of same. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good part of it, right? Like I also research a lot for the game, and I think what that's one of the strengths of historical board game. You cannot simply assume that you know because you live in the country or in the culture where you know a bit more about the story. You do need to research to understand all of the different nuances, and a lot of those came during the research. And I think it's also something that you, as a board game designer, learn when you go through that process.
So yeah, actually, let's get into that. Of all the different kinds of board game genres, what are unique challenges in designing historical games, especially about Southeast Asian history?
Well, one by one. So historical games is by the end of the day you make a choice because history is about who's telling it, right? So you in this case, when you're making a board game, you're also telling a story. When I am making Kartini, there's a lot of options that I make because I decide to do so. So, for example, the different names of places in Kartini, it's not exactly the name that refer to that places during that time. So in the 1800, 1900, the name of the place is different because during that time, it was a colonial name, right? But I decide to name it that is more informed by an Indonesian construct of the name. So that's one decision. So when you make a historical board game, a lot of your decision is political decision. A lot of your decision is about taking a stance on what kind of stories that you want to tell. So including what events or what are the things that you want to include in your game, portray in your game, or what you're going to leave out of the game. All of these are decisions that you need to actually know why you made them. So you can't simply like, oh, you know what, because I can't possibly represent everything, so I'm just going to do this. No, so for me, like it's very important to say why these events are the ones that are included, or at the very least, you have the idea, you have the reason behind it, right? So every single decision is a really reason-informed decision why you make any of this.
Yeah, I think that's something I learned from Zenobia is that historical games, it's less about the facts, right? Because sometimes history is people think like, oh, this happened on this day and this happened on this day and stuff. But especially with games, every game is actually an alternate history because like let's say my game is right, the Americans won, right? So the Americans can't win every time we play that game or else the game would be boring. So if the Filipinos then it's already alternate history. So it's already not a fact. But you can back up like that this alternate history could have happened because of the facts, right? One challenge I had I was that it was hard for me to find information.
The same. Yeah, there's not much. Like I think in the context of it, I don't know. Maybe I don't know in the Philippines, Nico, but not much of record is in Indonesia, right? It's not part of our rigorous, rigorous documentations of historical fact. Is not part of Indonesian nation building, so to say. So of course there are records, but it's not as rigorous as it might be in some other places, for example. And also because the institutions that would look into more rigorous records are not necessarily available, right, in widely in Indonesia at the very least. So that's also one of the challenges.
Yeah, in my case, the Philippine-American War, unlike other wars where you can find whole books just about that war, in my case, they were only chapters in books. Like this is a book about Philippine history, and I had to only get this chapter about the Philippine-American War. So there was not much information.
No, and I think that with Zenobia team at that time, at the beginning, they wanted to be very rigorous. They'd be like, oh, where's the academic publication about this? Like where is the... And then we're like, well, there isn't any. Where do you want to find it? Like nobody writes about this. Doesn't mean that it does not happen. Doesn't mean we don't have historical record. But the historical record is not it's not to like quote unquote the standard that it is in Europe or in the US, for example, right? And so for them, it's also another eye-opening situation for them as well, because then they realize, oh, we've been putting a standard that that is not going to be applicable in the rest of the world, right? So I think there's a lot of learning from both sides throughout the entire process.
Yeah. Actually, so it's 3:50 now.
Yeah, questions.
Yeah. So I think it's best if we have some questions. If anyone has any questions, I still have some questions, but if anyone here has any questions, then yeah. Okay. Emerson here has a question.
What were her mechanical inspirations? Like what?
Okay. So what were your mechanical inspirations for your game, Kartini?
Oh, my mechanical inspirations. I can't really pinpoint to one because I think it's a combination of different Euro games that I've played, Emerson. So the idea is that I can't say what's the name of that game. So because basically it's a worker placement, and then whenever you put the workers in different places, that workers would give you different advantage, but there's also different mechanism that gets unlocked when the workers are being put there, right? So very broadly, maybe something like the trilogies, the North Kingdom trilogies, Shem Phillips. So because I play a lot of Shem Phillips games, and definitely I think there's so one of my favorites genres of games. So I think there's a little bit of elements there, but Shem Phillips he really likes this idea of meeple doing different things in different places, right? Like a little bit different here and there, and meeples moving around basically. So, but I think I took the idea of in different place things will happen differently, and you trigger a different kind of mechanism, and it gives you an advantage. So that's one of the things that is definitely mechanics that aspire me. The other parts, which is not similar at all, is actually wingspan. But I'll explain why. Wingspan is very good if you break it down into its bone, right? The mechanism of wingspan. It's literally a triangle. If you do A, you create B. If you create B, you can create C. And then if you have C, you can do A. So that's why it's very tight. Wingspan is a triangle. There's only three things if you break it down into its bone. So to me, it's very important then to identify what are the different resources that you have, and what are those resources giving you, and then how do you get those resources, and then when you draw them into like a diagram, they should connect, and then each of those should be balanced with one another. So not one resource is stronger than the other, not one investment is stronger than the other. To me, that kind of balance, I try as much as possible to aspire to that. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, that's such a good description for wingspan. Actually, you're talking about eggs, foods, and cards, right? Basically, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Actually, it's a question for both of you.
It's a question for both of us.
This is less a question about mechanics and more something a bit more general, admittedly.
Okay, it's a more general. It's not about mechanics. It's a general question.
And there's someone who got interested on the top here.
Okay, he's interested in the talk.
How do you get more people interested in historical board games? Your game sounds really interesting, especially as I have sisters who grew up in Miriam, which is a all-girls high school and college. So how do I get more people who aren't interested in board games to be interested in your board games?
Well, first of all, when you design a board game, you don't design for everyone. I think that's very important to know, right? There are different audience for different kind of board games. Some gamers really like something more casual. Some other gamers really like something more analytical. Others particularly love abstract, right? Stories actually turn them off, which is absolutely fair. So you need to first know what is your line of game and who are you appealing to with your kind of games, right? And then you design in a way in that corridor. At least that's how I design it, because I think it's impossible to try to satisfy everyone. And also sometimes I feel a bit futile if you try to attract people who are not particularly interested in one type of game. However, I do not think that it doesn't mean that people won't be interested in your game. It's just that you need to find an angle where it might be appealing to them, right? Like, so for example, here in Singapore, I've been invited quite a number of times, and then also outside of Singapore, where people are very interested in the topic. So the idea of using board game as either an educational purpose or a way to talk about difficult themes, or to represent, like an event in history where people can can empathize and understand better rather than just by reading or by listening to the story, right? So board game is another way of approaching that. So it's about finding that angle of your board game that can appeal to the kind of audience that you're looking at. And it doesn't mean that they have to then buy into the entire thing, right? So sometimes what I do is that like people will play one or two rounds and that's enough, because what's important for them is to understand, for example, how can board game conveys or address social issues, right? So for these people, that's what's important. It's not about completion of the entire game. So to me, that's how it is. I design it with an audience in mind, and that's how I design it. But then when I introduce it to people who are not necessarily the audience that I have in mind, I'll try to find an angle where they can relate to the game so that they can at least, try out the game. And like, for example, just want to say, the family of my husband, they play games, but they play casual games. And my husband tried to introduce Kartini to them. And they literally just stare at the table and said, like, this is too much for us. There's no way we can understand this. Like, they're like, there's so many pages in the rules. There's no way we'll be able to do this kind of game. So sometimes people are just, just different kind of gamers, right? And I don't take offense when people are like that, because it's just, the same way when you make movies or you make books, right? There are people who are the kind of audience that you're writing or you're making the product for.
Yes, I agree. Now, actually, your answer was so good. My answer is a little embarrassing. Because when I designed Pursuit of Aguinaldo, I was thinking, these mentors and judges, they're all hardcore gamers. I'm going to make a game that they like. So
I see. That's fine as well. Yeah.
I was thinking about winning the contest, not about making a game for. I didn't win, but still, yeah. So I still like my game, but it's a lot heavier than the usual thing I make, because there was a little bit part of me that was like, let's try to design to impress the judges instead of like.
Sure. Yeah.
But that being said, I still like my game. So yeah, just a little bit. Your answer was great, and mine was a little bit selfish.
No, I think it's complimentary.
I'm just interested since your game was finalist in 2021.
Yes.
And it was published.
Yes, last year.
Last year.
Yes.
Since it was published, how was the reception? Like, there's a specific audience or target player interest group for that. Were they able to play it? And when they played it, what was their reception? Especially since the topic is about the women in Indonesia, which I believe, visiting your country in my work, then there's really some kind of, how do you say this, a cultural dynamics as well with regards how women are treated. So that's my interest.
Yeah. Yes. So far, the reception has been great. It's so much better than I thought it will be. So I'm very grateful. So maybe several different things that I can mention is that first, I went with Ion Game Design. They're a Swedish publisher. And I did that on purpose because I mentioned that just because it's an Indonesian game. And I think, Nico, it's related to the previous question, right? Like, what is the challenge of a Southeast Asian board games, basically? The worry is that, like, if it's an Indonesian game, then only Indonesian people are going to play it because no one else is going to be interested in it, right? So to have a Swedish publisher to actually say, we are interested in publishing this, to me is already a win, because their distribution is mostly in Europe and in the US. And again, of course, not everyone then be like immediately like, oh, what is this game? I totally want to play this. Of course, some people are like, well, it's not necessarily the themes that I don't even know about Indonesia. Why would I be interested? Of course, there are a lot of people are like that. But there are also a lot of people who are like, look, we've been wanting to have games that are informed by historical context or cultural context that is beyond Europe and America and the Silk Road, right, basically. And Kartini would be very appealing to them. So even regardless of their background and regardless of where they're from, when they play Kartini, they tend to really like it because I think there's a lot, when you are like a strategic board games, they're like, oh yeah, this is a strategic game. But what I'm very happy about is for people to really relate to the story and can see the kind of stories that I want to tell. So in the general public, it's been really great. And like I said, I've been getting a lot of requests and invitation and stuff like that for people who look into board gaming into something a bit more serious, to address social issues or about education and so on. So like MIT Game Lab, for example, invited me into one of their workshop about game and to address social issues, stuff like that. So that's the part that I didn't actually thought that's going to happen, which is great. In Indonesia itself, it has been really wonderful. Board game scene in Indonesia is still very small, so there are not too many people playing board games, but they were just ecstatic to have an Indonesian game by an Indonesian designer is actually out there in distribution that is not just in Indonesia. So I am, so to me that was a conscious decision why I go with a Swedish publisher rather than an Indonesian publisher, because that is exactly the kind of effect that I want to have. I want to start people to feel comfortable playing a game that the theme that they might not be so familiar with, but thought, oh, we could actually play this game. There is a game. It's still fun, right? To touch on another thing, when I designed this and when we developed it with IM Game Design, I always say, I know the historical part is important. I want it to be there, definitely non-negotiable, but I also want it to be fun. So first and foremost, it needs to be fun because it's a game. I want anyone who plays it can still have fun with it. So yeah. So thankfully, it has been great so far.
Wow, sounds great. I think when we go to Singapore, we should definitely try it. So we'll hopefully see you there. Yeah.
Would love to see you for sure. Yes.
Yes. So the Asian Board Games Festival Singapore hasn't been announced yet, but it's usually at the end of November. So, this is such a great conversation, but unfortunately, we also have another panel after this.
No
it's
problem.
actually a panel on women designers. So also.
That's great.
Is there, maybe we can take one last question before, is there any last question? No? Okay. Okay. My last question is there anything you want to plug or are you designing anything new? Where can we find your game? Yeah. So
Just to say, I am terrible. I am very terrible at plugging because I do not have social media as the only thing that keeps me sane. So I happen to like people and I like to keep liking people. So I rather not have social media.
That's a very good.
You can have my email address in contacting me. Nico has my email address. So if you want to contact me, please ask Nico. It's absolutely fine. I'm happy for people to email me. I'm working on a couple of games. I don't want to announce it just yet because it's still in, I'm the kind of person who don't want to, talk
you
out
don't
of
want to
turn.
jinx it. Yeah. You don't want to
Just
jinx
to kind of
it. I understand.
let's focus on the work for now. But I mean, thank you so much for this, Nico. I'm happy to meet everyone, even though virtual. Hopefully, if you come to Singapore in November, we get to meet in person as well.
Yeah. Oh, while you're here, I might as well introduce you to the women designers so that I don't know, you might collaborate something in the future.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sherria Ayuandini is a dual PhD in medical anthropology and political sociology. Her bio is very impressive. I can read it to you guys a little later.
Sorry, it's a bit long.
Yeah, she's an avid gamer. She was a finalist in the Zenobia Historical Game Design Awards, the first one. She was a finalist with her game Kartini. Can you just give a 2-cent, because you can summarize it better, what Kartini is about?
Yes, it's about educating women in Indonesia. So it's the setting is late 1800, early 1900. So the game, you basically manage a school, and then you invite girls from different islands in Indonesia to come to school, and then they study there, and then they take on a profession after they graduate. And then with different professions, they can do different things, and it opens up your gaming to do a lot more things because they've now take on a particular professions after their education's finished.
Yeah, there. And Kartini was published just last year by Ion Game Studios. Is that correct?
Ion Game Design. Oh, maybe one more thing that I need to mention, Nico, and I don't know whether you're aware, and just because this is not just my game, right? This is because it's Ion Game Design with the development and everything. So Kartini we won the Lizzie Maggie Award of 2026. So this is a board game award, a French board game award, and it is given to a board game that highlights social issues. So I was very, very honored to receive the award by Lizzie Maggie Award, particularly because Lizzie Maggie Award, Elizabeth Maggie is the original creator of Monopoly. and she
Yes.
created Monopoly. Yeah, I think everyone knows, right? She created Monopoly as a critique towards capitalism, but then Hasbro kind of, took it from her and turned it into a machine of capitalism itself.
Yes.
So Lizzie Maggie is quite a forgotten board game designer who's actually very great and fantastic. And if we played Monopoly correctly, it's supposed to show that there's a second mode of it, which is cooperative mode. So if you play co-op, you always get out better than if you play as commercial the way that the Monopoly is now. So it's actually a really fantastic game. So I felt very honored to receive an award that was created to honor Lizzie Maggie.
Wow, that's great. I didn't even know there was an award out, but it makes sense to make an award for her. Yeah. But
Yeah.
Congratulations on your award. I was going to
Thank
say
you.
congratulations on your publishing, but also congratulations on your award.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, so if anyone is going to Asian Board Games Festival Singapore at the end of the year, we'll figure out something where we can
Yeah.
meet up, play Sherria's game, and also if you want to share any of your games with her, I guess we can.
Yeah, would love to. Would love definitely.
I have other questions. I don't know. Maybe we can continue.
That's okay. I know that there will be other panels, so I'll duck out
Yeah.
and have a great panel. If happy to meet everyone. Hopefully, we'll meet again.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you
Bye. Thank you so much.
so much.